Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Welcome to Fast Track Building to Modular Edge. My name is Ryan Cantu. I am the Director of Major Projects for Wilmot Modular Structures. We're a small business headquartered out of White Marsh, Maryland, which is right down the street. We've been in business for over 35 years. We specialize in temporary and permanent modular construction. Today we're going to be going over a very high-level overview of modular construction. Talking about fundamentals, efficiency, quality, sustainability, adaptability, safety, through integration. So there's a lot to package within 20 minutes, as you can understand, so I'll do the very best that I can to do that. What we get a lot is a question about what is modular construction. In its simplest form, what it is, if you can imagine a three-dimensional rectangle that's fabricated in a factory setting, shipped to site, unpackaged and assembled to create one building. Now we have different versions of that. They are single wide units, most typically called trailers. We also have modular structures, which are much larger components put together to be one building. We're also held accountable for the Industrial Building Code. There's two different types of construction, which is residential and commercial. We fall under the IBC, and every state has their own guidelines. They're very similar in a lot of cases, but as you can understand, the codes change depending on if you're near the water or in the mountains or in seismic areas. The historical evolution, as we understand it, the source material for that is coming from the Modular Building Institute. Dates back to the 1600s, where a colonial American actually migrated from England who desired to have some English architecture transported across the Atlantic Ocean. Is kind of where that started from. And I'm sure across the globe there could be other examples. I'm not a historian. However, that's one of the simplest ways we can explain where modular actually came from. Talking about the temporary and permanency of modular buildings. Across the spectrum, when you're looking at temporary, you're mostly looking at blocking and leveling a building on flat and level conditions for temporary use, and most common use is construction trailers. And most people are very familiar with construction trailers. Have a job site, need to have a place to put their employees, desk space, computers, so they can oversee a particular site. If you go to the far end of the spectrum for more permanent, then you start looking at what you have to do with the property, the ground, the foundation systems, and what it would take to actually put that building there for a longer period of time. And we also get a lot of questions about, well, are they old trailers? And there's no disrespect about the word trailer. We like to use the word modular construction for high performance buildings because the technology has lent it that way to where we are to now, and what we use for our materials to finish the buildings. What we specialize in is speed. Everyone, as you know it, wants something yesterday. In order to get that, we have a large lease fleet that we support the Mid-Atlantic states that we pull from, and we can actually mobilize very, very quickly to job sites to support projects. And we can also work with design teams to develop a solution. And most people here, facilities managers, that's the show, right? So you may have a project where you have you need swing space to put your employees, or a water main might have burst. You have an emergency situation where you have to put people somewhere. We can draw from that lease fleet to displace your people there temporarily while you fix that emergency. And then we take the building down, disassemble it, move it on to its next project site. Or we can go into a little further where you want to develop a project that actually is modular in nature, where we can look at a typical construction project, value engineer it, and design it as a modular facility. Now, this graphic that you're looking at here is very, very common throughout the industry. It's a simple explanation of looking at site-built construction versus modular construction and schedules. And as you can see from the left-hand side, we're held accountable for very similar requirements for design, permits and approvals, site developments. All those things still have to take place in order to put something on a property, whether it be temporary or permanent. Where we excel at is, if you can imagine, while you're doing the site work and improvements, the building is being fabricated in a factory setting. So when the site is ready to accept it, the building can be transported, staged, unwrapped, unpackaged, and assembled into one complete structure. And of course, I'm making it seem a little more simple than it is. However, there's a lot of other pieces that fall into play. And for example, right now, based on contracts received, we have multiple factories in different areas of the region that have different line times based on level of quality, tolerances, what you're looking to build. For example, if you wanted to build a typical office trailer, they typically will stock that material and buy it in huge loads so that they can produce this very, very quickly. We could also go on the far end of the spectrum and build a skiff building for government applications. So people that understand what those requirements are a lot more intense. And the requirements are on what you have to do with all those assemblies to make that operational and meet the government standards. And we also have factories that can do that as well. Talking about safety, compliance, and innovation, we build everything in a controlled environment, which means it's out of the weather. So if you compare that versus site-built construction, and this is no dig on site-built because we need construction. These are just two differences in methods of product delivery. So I want to make sure that's clear. When you're actually building in a controlled environment, you don't have to deal with the weather elements, the rain, the delays, whereas you would on a typical construction project. So once the site is ready to accept it, the building has already been wrapped and packaged and ready to go, we can send that building in its pieces to the site. And to kind of break that down a little bit further, we're held accountable for making sure that those modules can make it down the highway. So when you understand the width of a highway lane, the bridges, overhangs, and all those different things make a big deal of difference on what it takes to get those modules to its end destination. I recently worked on a project in Norfolk where we put in a 30,000 square foot two-story building with extra long, extra tall, and extra wide modules, and we had to shut down the tunnel to be able to do a nighttime delivery to get those buildings on the pad site where they were then installed and put together. It's a pretty large project. Everybody at the factory are certified to work. They have their own stations as it goes down the process. What I'd like to do is take it a step further and talk about what happens when the frames are built. They go from that stage in the factory to the floor where they build the floor assembly, the floor system. They put the tile floor down, typically vinyl tile. Next station, usually, it's where they put the walls together and mount those to the building itself. While that's being done, you have another section, an area in the factory that's building the roof. So when it passes those inspections by stage, it goes down the assembly line and the building is put together. And then through the process, they put the circuitry, the wiring, the mechanical systems, and everything inside the building. And as it's inspected and goes forward, it's packaged, complete, trimmed out, and then staged in the yard where it's ready to be transported. So if you can take for a second and imagine each individual module having its own circuitry, its own ductwork, everything back to its central points. So when it gets to the job site, it makes it very, very easy for the site workers and subcontractors to then put everything together and make those connections. What's very, very important in our process also is the third-party review and certifications. So what that is aside from our engineers designing and certifying and stamping plans, it has to go to the state process where they oversee and ensure that what we are doing meets the state compliance for their use. So we all know that business use, assembly use, educational use, all have their own codes and requirements by occupant load, life safety, for what you're doing in those spaces, and they hold us accountable to make sure that we're doing that. And on top of that, making sure that we meet energy code compliance for the code for that particular state. And again, it goes through rigorous inspections. We have a QC program in the factory. We also send our own QC managers down to walk the building while it's in production to ensure that we're building it the way that it should be. Now, as far as ongoing innovations, as you can imagine, solar panels, we do panelized systems, and most of that is dictated by the owner. So a lot of times someone will come to us and say, hey, I've got a challenge. What do I do? How do I solve it? It's not always about selling something. It's about delivering on what you can do to help make that pain go away and make it much more efficient for the end user. That's how I like to approach the projects. Anticipating trends is always dictated by what the market's calling for. We have a new product right now that's our Smart Line, which is a storage container that's actually been retrofitted and modified so it could be self-contained and deployed to remote locations completely off the grid. So what that would mean to someone that doesn't have access to power is great. And if you can imagine collecting the water, reusing the water to making that system more efficient, how important that would be for someone to be operational, or if you have a wildfire or a national disaster, hurricane, something like that, to be quickly deployed. These all can be modularized so they can fit on ships and airborne vessels so they can be transported throughout the globe. What we're looking at here is a couple examples of what I just mentioned before, the storage container. You can see it's got a deployable system around the top elevation. It's got several solar panels, It's got lighting. Inside that building, you have a place for an office worker, up to several, depending on how many you want to put in there. It's only 8 by 20 container, so you can imagine the space is limited. But they also do go into a 40-foot length, and we're constantly working on other revisions and other applications that we can actually go bigger than that with modular construction. Anybody here know Cal Ripken Jr.? You heard him, he's a legend, right? The building on to the upper right was a building we were working with Cal Ripken Jr. We collaborated with him and his team, and the Aberdeen site location for Ripken Baseball approached us and said, hey, we want to take storage containers, we want to modify them and make it into a merchandise building so the people that come to our stadiums could actually have a place to buy hats, baseballs, pictures, whatever they're selling. So in talking with them and understanding what the end goal was, that development of the design came to what you're looking at today, which is actually a 2-piece unit with a roof system that's designed to accept a canopy system to be mounted on the top for an observation deck at a later date. So in doing that, you have to plan with the end in mind and understand that you have to modify the foundation systems so that it can accept all that additional weight and loads at a later date. You can't do that later, you have to do that earlier. So all the concrete had to be adjusted to handle those loads. And as you can tell on the bottom, that's that vinyl wrap that goes all the way around is your Maryland flag. It's got very keyed and pointed marketing. We spent a lot of time with their design team to put together the graphics that you have on here. In addition, that's in their main thoroughfare going down their stadium entrance. So all the parents and the kids that go to their baseball sites stop by there, they do selfies and get all excited. It's a really beautiful building. And then what's not shown is a separate building that's down the road that's auxiliary for all their office operations that we took one of their baseball fields to consolidate everybody to come in. They're working remotely into one site. So we're able to actually pull everybody together and help their operations become more efficient. At the bottom left, you're looking at a typical double wide approach. That's for a fire station. And as you can tell, we customized the outside to look fire engine red. Fire chief was extremely happy with that. As you can tell, it looks nice. It's got a high rib steel look. Looking at the two elevation differences, you can see just one minor change in what that does to the architectural facade by the horizontal striping in black in comparison to running the high rib steel completely vertical. It changes the whole design of the building, or the look. On the bottom right, you're looking at a building that we built in Texas for an energy company where we consolidated a lot of their employees on one particular site. That elevation faces south, and they could have met LEED certification standards, which is very, very high in energy efficiency. They elected not to go down that path. However, a lot of the same design principles were employed or deployed on this particular project, where it's southern facing, it catches most of the sunlight. All the windows were adjusted to meet the different levels of the light that come into the structure, so you wouldn't disturb the employees, but they would still get adequate light. All those things play a role, in addition to how the mechanical systems are designed to also adjust with the fluctuations in temperature. And along the front, you see it's got a poured concrete with a limestone accent, where you take the level of, and this is actually a temporary building, by the way. So what we did here was we installed the foundation system with very, very little site disturbance. But as you can tell, we spent a little bit of money on the front by putting in poured concrete walkways, and it gives the feel. You wouldn't even know that by looking at it, at least you kind of know what you're looking for. Very, very cool project. Quality and durability. Through our standardization process in the manufacturing, we're able to build our structures with the same materials that you would see on site build construction. We use the same type of lumber. We use steel in our frames. We have similar flooring materials, acoustical T-grid ceilings. We can do painted gypsum walls. We still use mechanical systems. It's just done at a faster rate because we can do concurrent construction methods by being able to fabricate the structure while the site is being developed. And again, we kind of touched earlier on the quality control measures throughout. We also have a site project manager that will follow the building to the site and be on site fully through its completion. Now, sustainability, energy efficiency, we use eco-friendly materials, LED lighting, low E glazing, low or no VOC products, insulation. When it goes through the third-party process, we have to meet the energy codes for that particular state, and they will actually tell us if the calculations don't come back properly on what has to be done in that building so it meets those energy codes. And all of those things weigh into their computer program. And I'm not a scientist or a programmer to tell you what those calculations are, but they do it. That's how it has to be done. Flexibility and customization. A lot of people, this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about working with an owner. It's highly recommended to bring our team in early. We know that for emergencies and disasters, that's not typically possible. However, if there's a project that may require a space that you want to have built within a specific time frame, we can work that back with you on a schedule and explain what the milestone key points are throughout the process to hit that end date. Like I was saying earlier also, based on issuance of POs to our factories, that's the only way that they operate in reserving line time. So if I issued a PO to our factory today, one that comes to mind, I could have a building coming offline in late April, early May. That's extremely fast. Once our buildings hit the factory floor, they produce very, very quickly. Now there are long lead time items that you have to consider, HVAC, doors, windows, specialty items. Understand, that's why when we come in earlier, we can sit down and talk with you about those particular items to get them ordered and ordered quickly so that they can meet the timelines. Ease of expansion, modification, and relocation. So modular inherently, if you can, as we talk through, taking the building, putting it together and assembling it on site, now think about when you're done with the project, what has to be done. Disconnect the utilities, pull the cabling out, pull the furniture out of the building, cut the seams, pull the building apart, package it, and then reuse it again. It's transported away for its next life. Now, going back to the third-party certification process, if we know that an investor or an owner wants to use that building for a different project site, we typically add multiple state seals. So let's say that we're operating in Maryland today, but they may need to relocate to Virginia, Delaware, West Virginia, wherever they want to go. We add those state seals to the building so that then the local authority in that jurisdiction reviews the plans. They see it's already certified for its use. So we try to plan with the end in mind so that the owner has an investment that they can reuse, and it's not just a one-off sale. They got to try to figure out what they're doing with it. And on top of that, we can bring our design engineers, if your occupancy or something changes on the inside of the building, work with you on readjusting the interior design to meet your new program requirements for its next use. Very, very important. It's a huge advantage. We touched on it earlier also about the diverse project applications. IBC 503 talks about office spaces, educational use, assembly use, laboratory, dormitories, government and SCIF work. There's also high hazard and other different applications, but the most of what we focus on is business and educational use, and that covers the bulk of our business. The benefits and integration for our project solutions as a delivery method is a tool in the toolbox. It's not the answer all. So when we're talking about incorporating between site-built construction and modular, I'll give you an example. I'm working with a client right now that's wanting a fire station, apparatus bay, and a bunkhouse scenario. So what we're doing now is designing the pre-engineered metal building application to tie and marry into the bunkhouse so that we can deliver that project 40 or 50% faster. And I've been told I only got 2 minutes left, so I got to kind of skim through here. This is a picture of our new headquarters operations up in White Marsh, Maryland. It's a 2-story building next to a maintenance facility, our operations center. I'm showing these very, very quickly. I got to make sure I meet the time frames here. As you can tell, these are all going to be site applied. It's got our Wilmot logo. Everyone in here is talking about how great we are. There's the live picture of what it looks like. This picture was taken a couple weeks ago. It's got a modular elevator system installed on, now the building is on a stem wall with interior concrete piers, permanent application. That's going to be our new headquarters there in a couple weeks, or a couple months. It'll be done in June, I believe. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed my presentation. It's happy to be here.